endorses them to go through to Gateway. So as I said, we've just got 3 on the agenda today, and we would like to recognise the traditional owners of the land, custodians, and their future and emerging and past custodians. So in that regard, the panel will now consider item number 1. And item number 1 is in respect of 270 to 272 Pacific Highway Crow's Nest. If you, everyone is invited because it's a public meeting clearly, but if you do not wish to participate in this part of the meeting, if it's not your item, I just suggest that you put yourself on mute, and you can come back into the meeting when your item comes up. As I said, clearly it's a public meeting. The council has made a decision to make all planning proposal meetings a public meeting, which is a good thing in that it provides for greater transparency in the process. So the first item, as I said, number 1 is we do note that we have had written submissions from residents of the area, but today to the panel we only have the applicant who wishes to address the panel. Mr. Paul Reedy, Project Manager, could you there? Yep.
Hi, how are you? I'm from Fitzpatrick and Partners Architects, actually.
All right, yes, thank you. I do see you there, thank you. And Stephen Papadopoulos?
Yes, representing the others.
Yes, thank you very much. And Dan Keary?
Yes, I'm here on the project town planner.
Fine, thank you very much. And then we have Padre Scollard, the applicant as well. Are you here?
No, he's not here today.
He's not here. Okay, thank you very much. And we have observing only Cameron Thompson from Keyland Consulting as well. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep. I'll just briefly introduce the panel to you. I'm Jan Morell, the chair of the panel, and I have chaired the North Sydney panel for since the inception of this particular panel, which is some 7 or 8 years, I believe. The other members of the panel today, we have James Harrison, and if you'd like to just give a brief outline of your experience, James, for the benefit of the applicants.
Yep, thank you, Jan. I've been a town planner in Sydney, based in Sydney for over 40 years. I've worked both in local government and in private consultancy, sat on a number of government panels. More recently, as I say, I was in consultancy, but since July of last year, I've generally been sitting on panels and taking things somewhat more easily. So that's me.
Thank you, James. And John?
Yes, thanks, Jan. I'm an architect and town planner, and a past Deputy Lord Mayor at the City of Sydney with quite a number of years of local government experience behind me. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you. And Ken?
Yes, I'm Ken Robinson. I'm a retired environmental scientist and planner with about 30 years experience, and I'm the community representative on the panel.
Thank you. And just for the applicant's benefit, my background is as a town planner for some 40 years. Not that I'm trying to upstage you there, Ken. My previous full-time position was Commissioner with the Land and Environment Court for 14 years. And since that time, like James, my only role has been to sit on or chair local planning panels and the Sydney panel. So if you would like to brief us, I'm in the applicant's hands as to how you wish to present to us, and then we will have some questions of you, no doubt.
Okay, thank you, Jen. I'll kick off. You've introduced our other speakers. So we'll just give you a bit of a background. We acquired this site in 2019 with the intention of some form of commercial redevelopment. And that was a bit of an unusual request at the time, as was highlighted to me by council officers and government officers, given we were in the midst of a residential boom. While we've worked very hard over the last year to try and achieve an outcome that works for both council, ourselves, and obviously the community. And we think we've done that, and our team has done quite a good job. So whilst the COVID environment has disturbed the commercial markets and, you know, supply, demand, pricing, etc., we're still very committed to proceeding with this project, and we still see demand for these sorts of employment generating uses in this location. And I think in terms of the immediate area, those outcomes can only be positive in sort of reviving this precinct and also the village of Crow's Nest. So Dan Keary will talk through some planning and then hand over to Paul Reedy, our architect. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Yep, and thanks, Steve. We've reviewed the council officer's report, and we're very pleased to note that it supports the planning proposal proceeding to Gateway. And this is in recognition of the strong strategic merit of the proposal. Most importantly, its consistency with the provisions of the 2036 and Lennox and Crow's Nest plan relating to the provision of commercial floor space and employment generation in that precinct. This is a key point, as the site subject to the planning proposal is the only 100% non-residential site within Crow's Nest under the 2036 plan. And this indicates its strategically important location and key role in contributing to the plan's employment targets. We've worked very closely with council officers as well as the Department of Planning at all stages of the process to prepare and refine the planning proposal to respond to issues raised by council officers around bulk, scale and amenity. And the result is a planning proposal that fully complies with the 2036 plan in terms of use, height, street wall height, setbacks and overshadowing impacts. In relation to FSR, we are compliant with the 5.6 to 1 in the 2036 plan. However, have included a provision for additional FSR up to 6.02 to 1, provided this is additional floor space is below ground and is used for non-residential purposes. And this provision was specifically formulated in consultation with council officers in recognition that there's a substantial opportunity here to optimise the employment benefits on the site and its ability to meet the 2036 employment targets, whilst also minimising any overshadowing or visual impacts, given that the additional FSR is entirely below ground. We've noted council officers have recommended that the height be reduced from 59 to 54 metres. Now, on this point, we are compliant with the 13 stories in the 2036 plan, and the planning proposal is supported by a detailed design and visual analysis prepared by Fitzpatrick and Partners. And these analyses demonstrate that a building of 59 metres, which incorporates design techniques, including a substantially stepped building form, upper level setbacks and landscaping, will be compatible with the evolving built form character of the locality and the other controls in the 2036 plan, and will not result in any undue visual or overshadowing impacts. And we also note and support council officers' recommendation for a site-specific DCP and his opportunity to address these design matters in more detail. Paul, I'll hand over to Paul in a second, and he'll talk in more detail to the design matters, including the justification for the proposed 59 metres height. So on this basis, there's strong strategic and site-specific merit for the planning proposal, and we ask that the panel support the council officer's recommendation that it proceed to gateway determination, but in the form it was lodged, including the proposed maximum height of 59 metres. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have some questions, but we'll allow Paul to address us beforehand. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Shem. Can I share screen? I just want to share a graphic to be able to talk to.
Yes, Peter? Yep. We'll arrange that. Thank you very much. Good.
There you go. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yep. Yep.
So the 59 metres is, and council have observed that, you know, they wanted to reduce it to 54, and that 54 should be able to accommodate 13 stories. That may very well be the case. Having said that, what we've sought to do is tier the top of the building. So rather than having a flat level across the entire top of the building, We've tiered it down so that its lowest corner is the southwest corner, which is the leading edge of shadow. If I jump to some sections, this might become a little clearer. So the red box that we're looking at overall is the height plane that sits inside the shadow envelopes provided by the 2036 plan. And you can see the building sits well below that. We've additionally, in organizing the 5.6 to 1 above ground, we've created additional setbacks to the west, to Pacific Highway, and indeed to the two sides as well, and lowered the building. So in essence, what we're trying to do is get the plant room in this top corner, which is the northeast corner of the site that has the least environmental impacts in terms of overshadowing. Now it's a taller volume than potentially it needs to be. Because this is a planning proposal at this stage, we've left that line run straight through to the top of the building, but there's more than enough room in there for the plant room at the moment. I guess our view of it is it sits inside all of the controls, both in terms of that it's 13 stories, it sits inside the setbacks, and it sits inside the shadow plane. We kind of feel like the best time to define the actual top ORL of the building will be at DA, when we get a lot more services input and information, because we are constraining the services to this northeastern corner of the building, or northern half of the building, and then in particular in the taller volume in the northeast part. We're trying to avoid having to come back and have discussions about things like cooling towers, which can easily get up to 6.5, 7.5 meters in height with attenuation on top, trying to avoid them getting through a height plane. So we've given ourselves some flexibility. We don't think we're going to need the whole thing, but we think the time to make that decision is during the DA. So I guess hence we would like to leave it where it is at 59 for the time being. And that was pretty much all I had to say.
Right, very well. Clearly height is one of the issues that the panel is interested in. And I'll first of all open it up to other panel members as to whether they'd like to ask questions. James, John?
Okay, James Harrison. I've a quick question for Paul. Given that the North Sydney Council LEP allows sort of architectural roof features, and those features can be screening of plant, why do you need the 59 meters? Why doesn't it work with 54 meters?
Well, the simple answer to that question is I'm not sure whether it does or it doesn't, because we haven't done the services, because it's only a planning proposal at this stage. We haven't done the detailed services analysis of what that plant room needs. I'm just saying that we probably are better off giving ourselves some flexibility, and given we fit inside the envelope anyway, the shadow envelope that is, we didn't see any reason why we wouldn't give ourselves the maximum flexibility in the first instance, and then when we get into the detailed design, we can design it down. Obviously, from the client's perspective, he doesn't want to build a taller building than he needs to. The area we're talking about is plant room, not additional floor space.
I suppose foreshadow the answer to my next question is: has any thought been given to whether the that rooftop area will be accessible? Will it be a green roof or not? It's a case.
Most definitely. Can I share my screen again?
Yes.
Oh, hopefully you can see that. So the thought is that there's a tiering of roof spaces. So the first roof is at level 10. There's another one at level 12. And there's then one on top of the first piece of plant room. So we've articulated the western edge of the plant room down as well. The intention very definitely is all three are green. The top plant room will be penetrated with holes for cooling towers and things like that. So the top one isn't, but the lower three are. And then the roof form over this northeast corner is intended to have solar panels on it as well. So it's a mix of green roof and solar farm. If I pull up the render that we did, give me 2 seconds, from above. This is the intended form of the top of the building. This didn't form part of the pack because obviously it's design intent rather than a design intent at planning proposal stage, but the intention very much is that all of those west facing terraces get opportunities to be green roofs and the top forms stay as solar panels.
Thank you. No more questions, Jen.
Just following on from James, well, the council's LEP allows for something like 5.6 for architectural roof to camouflage plant, etc. It just seems that in itself is quite generous. So we are concerned about the extent of the additional 5 metres.
Another quick question. Alex has done a 5% permanent vacancy factor on this model. Is that what was agreed, or is that incorrect?
Can I ask who's speaking?
Yeah.
Hello, who's speaking?
I think somebody might have been not on mute that should have been.
Okay. So where are we at then?
So, sorry, back to your point. So the question about the architectural roof feature,
Yeah.
It's something that I'm happy to carry on with it being at 54 meters as council suggests. I guess we just thought it made more sense to have a bit of flexibility at this point, given we haven't done the detailed design. But if it sits inside all of those envelopes, but if it's the view of the panel that it proceeds with that 54 meters instead, and we rely on architectural roof feature clauses if we need them, that works too.
Yep. Okay, then fine. And we noticed that the additional floor space ratio, as you mentioned already, does not contribute to the bulk or height of the building, because it is in fact below basement and would be for uses that can be accommodated in such a basement. So we understand that. It was really the height was a concern. We are cognizant of the 2036 plan, and that this has come in generally within the guidelines of that strategy. And we certainly do support the fact that it is a commercial building as opposed to yet another residential. And this will be very important for the employment of Crow's Nest and its future. So Ken, do you have any questions you wish to ask?
No, thanks, Jan. I was just a bit concerned about the impacts, obviously, on the neighbours to the west, with a 13-storey building, be it 59 or 54. And I suppose there's much else we can do in terms of reducing those impacts. As you said, it fits within the shadow diagrams and things like that. So can you think of any other way of mitigating the size of a building on these people in the street behind?
Sinclair. Mm-hmm.
Well, what we have done in that regard is we've studied with council a lot the idea of what's the best balance between additional setbacks of that street wall or additional reduction in the height of the street wall. Hence that southwest corner of the building, sorry, is at level 9, not level 13. So we've already tiered the back elevation of the building down. We've additionally also set it back, then placed the various planes of the building slightly off each other so that you don't end up with a large street wall or a large building face all in one plane, and articulated the building into a series of built forms, which there's no denying the joint between single story or double story and 13 stories is abrupt, but that's what's contemplated in the plan. So I guess we're aligning ourselves with the plan and then trying to mitigate the impacts of that as much as possible by lowering those leading edges of shadow in particular.
Okay, thanks.
I think that will be a very important point in terms of, as Ken just said, the juxtaposition with the residential to the west, and any amelioration will be something that will be looked at in the actual assessment of the development application as well, because clearly some of the submissions made already are from those residents within that area. Very well. So John, did you have any more questions?
Not a question as such, but a comment that I presume you're aware, that is, the applicant are aware that the site-specific DCP will be publicly exhibited as part of this proposal. And I'd imagine that at this stage we've had reaction against the height, and I'm sure as that DCP comes out, there'll be a lot more reaction, but I'm sure you're aware of that's something to face up in the future.
Yeah, we are aware of that, John. We've had some preliminary discussions with the council officers. It will deal with the issues of the built form relationship, but as we've pointed out, we are within the 2036 plan controls, and we'll make some efforts to further address that that design relationship.
Thanks.
Yep, and the architectural statement clearly for the top of the building will be important, the fact that the height is something that one might say, well, what's the difference between 54 and 59? Well, at the end of the day, it's still a matter for the council to decide, but we'll be making our deliberations and providing a recommendation only to the council. And then after we provide a recommendation to the council, I think you might be lucky in getting it through before the caretaker period starts for council. So thank you all very much for your time today and addressing the panel and all the work that you've put into it as well. And for any of the members of the public that may be listening, this matter is very much in its initial stages, and whilst it's a public meeting, at the same time there will be clear public participation during the exhibition of the proposal, and the exhibition of the proposal will in fact include a development control plan, as the applicants indicated they're prepared to support that concept for the exhibition simultaneously. So thank you all very much for your time and attention today and your assistance to the panel, and our recommendation will be on the website probably by the end of this week.
Thanks, Jan. Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you.
Time.
This now takes us to the next meeting, to the next agenda item, and it is in respect of 153 and to 157 Walker Street, North Sydney. And I have a number of people on behalf of the applicant who wish to address the panel. I don't believe there are any public submitters who wish to address the panel at this point in time. Once again, this is very much an early stage of a rezoning proposal. The proposal is to amend the LEP for the North Sydney area, and it is to increase the height and provide for site amalgamation. I'll invite the applicant on behalf of Marprop. Nathan Michael, are you here online?
Yes, I am.
Right, thank you. I think we heard you earlier.
Sorry, we're not the applicants.
Oh, okay.
We are the owner of 157. The applicant is 153.
Okay, yes, I'm aware of that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So can I first of all then invite you, being the owner of 157, which we've had some discussion about prior to the meeting, what the position is of 157?
Obviously, legally, you don't have to gain the permission of a landowner for a planning proposal over your site. This is an MIT structure. We're a fund manager, and we own this on behalf of an institutional investor. So we've sent obviously objection to council previously, saying we don't approve this planning proposal being submitted on our land, but you legally don't need our permission. So this is why it's come through that, but we're happy just to hear the applicant's discussions and go from there.
Okay, I'll just ask you a question then in terms of the applicant has made approaches to you then in terms of doing a joint venture, or I'm just trying to understand the relationship between and the intent of this site being included in it.
Yeah, it's two separate owners. We've had discussions with them previously, but we're under an MIT tax structure. So we've said no to a joint venture.
Okay, just for, I'm a layman when it comes to what an MIT tax structure might be. So can you just inform me of what that means in essence? Yep.
It's a managed investment trust. So we get taxed at a lower rate for the trust, for the properties that are in this trust. But we're long-term owners and we're not developers. We can't be seen to obviously be buying something for a development profit.
So in terms of then change of ownership, is change of ownership allowed under this regime?
Yeah, we can sell. Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah. So I'm just trying to distinguish between the MIT and but you can still sell. So would that prevent you from having discussions with the adjoining owner?
No, it wouldn't prevent us.
Okay. Right. Mm-hmm.
But it's not something we're looking to do in the near future.
Right. So okay, I think the other panel members may have some questions, but I'll open it up to them. Thank you, John.
Jen, I'm a bit of a novice in this area as well, but if I could ask, the tax implications for selling would be negative as well, would they? In terms of you'd then come under the heading developer as such.
Yeah, I'm a novice as well, so I'd prefer not to comment on something that I'm not an expert in. But yeah, there would be negative implications to this asset and the other assets that are in the trust.
Thanks.
So yeah, that's all that it's a long-term hold for us, and I'm just here to observe the applicant's discussion points. But so yeah, I'm a novice on this as well, so I'd prefer not to comment on it. But it's a negative assumption, negative implication for us.
Can we just ask for how long has the trust held this?
I think we bought about 3 to 4 years ago.
Oh, right. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. Okie doke. Thank you very much for that background. And James, do you have a question, or Ken?
I just had a comment that I wanted Nathan to understand. If this planning proposal went through, Nathan, you would understand that there is no compulsion upon you to be involved in a joint venture with the adjoining property.
Yes.
It would just be an additional opportunity somewhere down the track.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Very well. And Ken, did you have a question at all? Not at this stage. Okay, thank you. So we also have Karina Kalman, but have you spoken for her, Nathan?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Great. And Elise, please.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes, thank you very much. And do we have Marco Damick online too? Yes. And we have Josh Owen.
Yes.
We can't see you, Josh.
Oh.
I can see Josh, Miss Morrell.
Oh,
Might
right.
be off the screen.
Perhaps, yeah, it might be out of my numbers. Okay. All right then. And we have Rick Miller. Rick Miller observing?
Yes, he's on the line. He's just on mute at the moment.
You're on mute,
Rick.
Rick.
Okay, that's okay. That's fine. All right then. So I'm in your hands, Elise, as to how you wish to address the panel.
Thank you very much. And it's nice to meet you after reading many judgments of yours. So by way of introduction, thank you for getting my name correct. So Elise Cleese, I'm a partner at Shaw Reynolds Lawyers. So just by way of introduction, we've come today following 2 years of negotiation with council as well as our neighbour at 157 Walker Street. And we thank council in the first instance for preparing this report So following the lodgement of this application and the payment of a very expensive fee, this is in fact the first time that we've had an opportunity to formally see council's response to the application which has been put before you. In terms of our submissions today, I just wanted to note that we've had 3 working days to respond to these issues. So this has been our first opportunity to really formally engage with the issues raised by council and of course engage with the panel as well. So in that regard, our team had meetings over the weekend as well as on Monday and Tuesday this week. Our client and we are instructed that our client has expressed a willingness to work with council to resolve the issues that have been raised. So to that end, today we have 3 speakers for the applicant. Because of the short notice, we couldn't facilitate the attendance of a further speaker in relation to feasibility. However, we will be addressing that. So I've got 3 speakers as you've introduced, as well as Mr. Rick Miller representing the applicant. So in terms of who will speak about what, I will speak first with respect to matters relating to 153 and 157 Walker. Marco Damick will speak to the design and feasibility issues, and he will be highlighting a number of important concessions that the applicant is willing to make. So we've heard what council has said, and Marco has a presentation that he will show in order to actually provide some of the additional information that council requested, as well as talk to those concessions. And then finally, Josh Owens will address the panel with respect to the structure of the proposal and also summarise the further material that we intend to provide.
Thank you.
So, in terms of the matters that I'll speak to, I'll do that now. So the primary issue that I would like to discuss today is in relation to the isolation issues. So 153 Walker Street is subject to isolation issues, and the ultimate outcome which we are trying to avoid is the isolation of 153 Walker. So but with the materials before you, panel members, you'll have a copy of the planning proposal prepared by APP, and Appendix E to that planning proposal is a letter which was prepared on the 29th of March by Mr. Chris Shaw, who's the principal of my firm, and also myself in relation to those isolation issues. I won't go into the detail of it, but I will give you a thumbnail sketch, which is that 153 is subject to isolation issues, and we strongly recommend that the strategic future of 153 and 157 Walker be carefully considered, given the implications that our advice in relation to site isolation will have on the future uses and development of both of those sites. Now, I'm mindful as well, and one thing that I wanted to point out is that my advice was written in March prior to the current draft amendments being placed on exhibition, and those amendments will have further impacts, which Marco will talk about in his presentation. But at the time when my advice was written, it boils down to one issue, which is that the property at 153 Walker is less than 1,000 square metres in area, which means that the maximum height on the site cannot be achieved without amalgamation. And so the height of future development on the site is limited to 45 metres unless it is amalgamated with an adjoining site. Now, in that context, I'd now like to talk a bit about the issues that have been raised by 157 Walker Street. Now, as I said, this is the first opportunity that we've had to see council's formal response to our planning proposal. It's also the first opportunity that we've had to hear some of the issues that have been raised by the neighbour. In terms of these issues, the extent of what we know is the same as the panel. In terms of within the council report on page 52, it summarises the complaints. Now, there are 4 key issues, and I'll briefly talk to 3 of them. So 3 of the issues which are on that page, the first one is in relation to 157 Walker Street not consenting to the lodgement of the proposal. The second is that the planning proposal will not be delivered by 157 Walker, or may I say the current owners of 157 Walker. And point 3 is that 157 Walker is held in a managed investment trust. Now, if I was to respond to those 3 points, I suppose as a starting point, my client is willing to share all of the communications that they have had with 157 Walker. None of those communications were confidential or in confidence. They're all open communications. Happy to share those with council if they wish. I'm instructed that 153 Walker has been actively trying to negotiate with the neighbour for some time, because 153 Walker is very conscious of the isolation issues infecting its site. I'm instructed that in 2019, MARPOP approached our client through an agent in relation to purchasing the site at 153. I'm also instructed that on the 23rd of June, the owners
Sorry, I just missed that in terms of who approached who again.
So the owners of 157 Walker Street
Yep.
approached the owners of 153 Walker Street.
Okay.
That's what I'm instructed of.
Mhm.
Then in June 2020, I'm instructed that the owners of 153 Walker and 157 Walker met to discuss a joint venture opportunity. And the intention was to discuss that opportunity between 153 and 157. Thereafter, as I've mentioned, there's quite a bit of correspondence between the Owners Corporation and Mr. James Marshall, who is also on the line, regarding the planning proposal. The materials were provided to Mr. Marshall before they were lodged. And of course, there was also communications in terms of valuations and dealing with some of the principles set out in Cavallaris and Sutherland Shire Council with respect to site isolation. So it's something that's at the top of 153's mind, and with that respect, we've been actively addressing many of the issues that 157 has raised. Now, even with that context, one thing that is troubling me is that under the Planning Act, there is actually no consideration of financial implications. So by that, it would be ultra vires to be considering those financial implications with respect to this planning proposal. As the panel would know, sometimes people get rezoned up and they get a benefit, and sometimes they get rezoned down and they suffer. But ultimately, the planning regime that we operate in is that that's not a relevant consideration. So we would be inviting council to be primarily concerned with the proper planning outcomes to pursue the orderly and economic development of the land in this location. In fact, there's an uplift for 157, and that's to their benefit. And if they don't want to take it, then perhaps an incoming party at a later date will take that benefit. But ultimately, neighbourly squabbles, which is bringing this objection to the fore, is not an issue that is a relevant consideration in terms of the planning outcome for this site. So in summary, those issues are outside of the ambit of the considerations. Notwithstanding that, we're happy to share the communications that we've had. Yes, the planning proposal benefits our client. Yes, it benefits 157, and in fact, it also benefits council. There's an uplift for those properties, and ultimately, the market will determine if the uplift is valuable, and that will be the planning outcome that we are trying to achieve in the future. There was also a fourth issue in relation to the consideration of the application and the complaint by 157 that it doesn't properly consider strategic or site-specific issues. Now, we don't have further information on that particular point. However, we would be very interested in getting a copy of the submission, happy to go through the GIPA process if that's the appropriate due course to deal with that. Notwithstanding that, Marco is with us and on the line today, and he's going to address some of those important concessions. And if you're happy for me to do so, I'd like to pass to Marco to talk through some of those important concessions that the applicant would like to present to yourself and council today.
Thank you. That haven't been presented to date. Is that what you're saying, Elise?
That's
Yes.
correct. So we received the report on Thursday, and then we've been in meetings over the weekend and also the last 2 days to come with this proposal today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Marco.
Thank you. May I just share the screen?
Yep, that's fine.
So hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, I will not yet, but it's coming, it looks like. Yes, good.
Okay, hopefully no gremlins last second. Thank you for the introduction. So my name is Marco Demick. I'm design principal with Architectus, and we're the architects responsible for this planning proposal. I would like to thank you for the opportunity for us just to address the panel and provide response to a few comments that have been raised since last Thursday. As it was mentioned, the proposal is a result of 2 years of design iterations and discussions in the council. But obviously this was all quite rushed, so I'll quickly go through the key points, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation, or ideally subsequent to this meet with the council to work together to get the optimal result. So I'm sure you're familiar with the subject sites and relevant site areas. It was mentioned before, the small site area on the 153 and corresponding site area on the 157, which is still reasonably small site on its own. While it can be developed in the LEP, it's still a reasonably small footprint for commercial development. The amalgamation of these sites is essential in order to provide a high quality contemporary office development. It allows for sufficient size to provide public domain benefits, building articulation, as well as ability to design a workplace that's responsive to current post-pandemic trends and environmental goals. This slide simply shows that individually the sites are either not feasible to be developed. In case of 153, the current controls result in less yield than the existing building, for example. And in case of 157, the resultant scheme cannot even reach a PCA grade quality, let alone provide any of the broader benefits beyond extremely basic redevelopment, basically just filling the envelope and resulting in a very small NLA and reasonably poor workplace outcomes. In terms of individual sites on 153, so even as a non-compliant development, we obviously restricted with the site area not being able to get to the maximum LEP height. But the site itself is just simply too small, even in a non-compliant manner, to be developed due to the small floor plate size. One thing to note, as it was mentioned previously, that since the submission of this application, the council proposed new draft DCP controls, which through introduction of site setback further invalidate any redevelopment of these sites, including any ability to get sufficient floor plates even with a combined sites. And that's probably worthwhile noting. However, the new DCP setback target, as it's explained in a company documentation, is aimed to provide tower separation. And this is not relevant to the northern boundary in particular, because the current LEP height and solar constraint on the adjacent site on 165 basically only allows for a small or 4-story or so addition. And that's purely because of the solar controls over doors fit and park and retention of those. So the resultant development, even built to a 0 setback to that boundary, will already achieve a difference with over 100 meter difference of the tower forms, and therefore achieve the intent of the DCP, the draft DCP controls. So in summary, it's just worthwhile stressing that this planning application does not increase yield compared to the current LEP and DCP compliant developments. And it has purely been designed to redistribute the allowable floor plate area by locking in a solar compliant envelope. So when we asking for the height increase, that's still fitting entirely within the solar footprint of the current LEP controls, and it can deliver a number of key public benefits. So the amalgamation and the planning proposal really allows us to substantially increase public domain, to redistribute the floor plate to create open to sky through site links, provision of street activation and DDL link between the streets, which is currently an issue, and ultimately a tower form that maintains the solar profile of current LEP while being able to have sufficient floor plate size that allows for high quality commercial building that can be articulated, so it's not struggling to achieve PCA grade required space or premium, and it can provide a appropriate architectural response. So I'll just briefly go to some of the key items that were raised in the documents issued on Thursday. So one note that was raised was the height increase and the plant room justification. Now the height increase is really not there to achieve the additional plant. The main intent is really to make sure that we can activate the floor plate, and it's really predominantly, while it does create some small plant space, it predominantly houses the lift overrun that allows us to access a series of communal open spaces within the roof. The actual form of the envelope presented in the documents is entirely just a solar plane over beyond the RL of 215, and basically the form has been infilled to create an architectural response within that in a reference design. But this response to create these communal spaces is in direct response to Council's urban framework document, which identifies North Sydney CBD as one of really devoid of properly publicly accessible space, with only 6% being accessible within the CBD. And what this allows us to do is create a series of communal spaces that can be accessed by the inhabitants of the building. So as I said, the reference design places plant rooms on each floor, so it's a bi-floor system. But one, as mentioned by Alice earlier, one of the concessions, obviously, there is very small amount of actual NLA within that additional height. Personally, we think it'd be a pity to not utilize that height for the articulation. But with that only 800 square meters of that space beyond the RL 215, that's something that the client is certainly willing to delete. We think that based on the contextual analysis, this is showing the envelopes. I know the 110 walkout, which is shown here as RL 283, has been submitted as a DA. And obviously, there's a number of sites alongside Arthur Street. We certainly don't see that addition of height in that sort of northern corner really has a substantial impact. If anything, it just sits equally in terms of the general assembly of the building forms. And as I said, the actual overrun to access is only required to go additional 13 meters or so to access those 3 levels. We've obviously extruded that envelope based on the no overshadowing to neighboring areas. Another point that was raised was the visual impact of that northern facade, especially built to zero setback. And what we've shown is, an architectural response in terms of the reference design that places panoramic lifts alongside that facade that will create a very dynamic and interesting architectural response. It allows us to ventilate the facade alongside there. We're not reliant on any daylight access to the north. It doesn't really affect anything in terms of development in 165. And you can see here in dotted lines, it's showing the LEP compliant height of that development. It's only additional 4 stories beyond the current building. And you can see the big difference between those heights, which is in line with those targets. So there's no reliance on daylight access from there. And by placing the core element that allows us to have green walls, ventilation of those areas, and effectively pyrolytic glass could deal with the issue of any boundary issues, but effectively it creates that sort of a mass to the north dealing with the environmental issues. Another item that was raised was the issue of the setback to Little Walker Street. So you can see here on the left image is basically just a view of current condition in front of 165, which pretty much reflects what the current DCP controls do. It basically allows the development to 0 meter from setback to a podium and then a setback beyond that. And the current condition is a narrow curb, effectively, of less than 600 millimeters with signs. And that's the pedestrian public domain environment that currently exists in Little Walker Street. For most part, people are forced to walk on the street. So basically, that would be the result of that when applied to 153 to 157. And what the proposed envelope effectively does, it creates a recessed form to the base that allows us for 5 meter setback to the Little Walker Street. It also creates a 5 meter through sat links linking it to Walker Street and creates ample opportunity for activation, extension of that public domain within the footprint of the building, and an ability to create a disabled access between the 2 streets as well. So in comparison, this is what a compliant podium envelope would look like, basically congesting that public domain entirely onto a basically service laneway at a moment. And really this has been done as it was mentioned in over 2 years worth of different meetings and negotiations with the council. It's sitting with a broader vision for the urban network of the CBD and creates a very important link from the station and in a sort of east-west direction all the way to one of the few parks within the North Sydney CBD, which is the Doris Fitton Park. Surely, in terms of the numbers, we are providing some 834 square meters, or 43% of the site will be accessible to public. This is excluding the lobby. This is purely accessible. The zone in red shows it open, and the zone in blue shows it some sort of a mixed mode veranda, which is envisaged in a document to create a disabled link and transition between levels, as well as retail activation. Just the last couple of notes was just one was the note on the floor plate size. Obviously, it's very comparable to recent developments, 110 Walker, 100 Mount Street, which is one of ours, and 1 Denison. Again, you know, well beyond PCA grade access to daylight, and you know, in a premium grade territory. It's reasonably still small floor plate. Proposal, the reference design envisages a number of landscape zones in terms of the wellness and in terms of the provision for landscape zones within the floor plate, and exactly that's what the envelope allows us, because we're no longer so congested in trying to meet that 1,000 net PCA grade requirement. And finally, the last point is really one of the notes that council raised was that issue of reversed setback to Lil Walker Street. Obviously, there's a huge benefit of that transition of the floor space. So what we've taken is, following council meeting, is we've taken that floor space from that through site link and placed it onto Lil Walker Street. This is comparing the two envelopes in terms of the solar gain, and it's, you know, imperceptible difference between the two in terms of solar gain to Lil Walker Street, with a huge benefit obviously to the public domain and the connectivity, the ability to walk all the way to the Doris Fitton Park. But as Elise suggested, our client, obviously, if that's no longer supportive, and if that advice has changed, you know, while it's a pity, we could consider putting back that floor space back in that sort of zone over the through site link. And yeah, so happy to answer any questions. That brings me to the end, but yeah, if there's any questions, happy to answer those. Thank you.
Perhaps if we pass to Josh now, because Josh was going to talk about the structure of our proposal and then just summarise, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll just check with the panel to see whether we've got any questions of the architect at this point. John, James, and Ken.
Just a question, Jan, of Marco, Mr. Danek. You've probably read in the report that there is, it's stated here, I'll read it, there is no substantive evidence that a consolidated proposal can't be feasibly erected under the current controls. Do you disagree with that?
To a degree, I think that a proposal that delivers this degree of public benefits will not be able to be developed. What we're trying to achieve here is create capture in the envelope, you know, through site links, connections, while still retaining that. Obviously, the current envelope allows for the LEP 215 RL. So in terms of the commercial yield, it's very similar, John. But in terms of the public benefit, what this development tries to do is lock in the envelope some of those key criteria.
I'm sorry, but you really haven't answered my question. Why can't you do all of those things under the current controls?
Well, I can step in if you like.
Sure.
Good afternoon, Mr. McInerney. One of the issues that we've had just with the short notice is that we were unable to get our financial and economic expert to join us today. However, I think, Marco, one thing that would perhaps be useful is if you could talk to your experience on some other projects within North Sydney, particularly the impacts of the setbacks on both of the sites and the implications of that with respect to the feasibility. And also, if I may add, Josh Owens, who is also speaking today, intends to summarise some of those additional materials which we will get to you with respect to the feasibility, including having a look at all of the various options and providing that information to council, which, as I said, unfortunately, today we don't have it in a form that we can share, but we intend to do so. Marco, would you like to talk a bit to some of those other projects that you've been involved with?
Sure. Well, I'm sure we have Neil McCarry here as well, Marcella. So you're all well aware of the other projects, and without talking specifics, obviously there's a draft controls which suggest site setbacks, and we touched upon this particular site with the big level change between the two buildings. In our opinion, it doesn't require setback to north, and it would allow for the site to be maximized in terms of the floor plate that allows for the PCA grade or beyond office space. Under the another advantage, obviously, is some of what this proposal is trying to lock in is to work within the LEP targets, which is the solar control and solar plane access to the RE1 zones, which is what we've modeled. And it effectively utilizes that solar plane. It locks it in terms of the envelopes, and then clearly transfers the floor space into zones where they provide minimum impact and allows to lock in the public domain benefits that consolidated sites can achieve. Now, the strict adherence to the current draft controls would basically result in less than 1,100 square meter gross floor plate area, which will be, with the cores and efficiency would be inefficient and wouldn't be able to achieve appropriate commercial grade building, not even A grade under the current provisions. So that's one of the elements. And what this proposal looks at balancing the intent of the DCP controls, which is the tower separation, which we believe it fully achieves, and also balances the intent of the LEP controls, which provides solar amenity to the RE1 zones, which we capture in the sloping plane and effectively a solar envelope that's captured on this site. So it's not a area grab in that respect, John. It's a net in terms of but it redistributes and locks in some of these key principles in a form that we believe addresses both the intent of DCP as well as the LEP that currently exists. Sorry, you're muted, but hopefully.
I'm just saying, thanks, Jan.
James.
I have no questions of the architect at this point.
Yeah, and Ken?
No questions from me, Jan.
Okay then, thank you. Let's, I suppose there is a difficulty here, and the council haven't had the opportunity to assess this additional information, which does always present difficulties. So if I could invite Josh Owen, the planner, please.
Thank you, panel members. Look, I'll keep it brief, and I suppose just on that point, I feel like we're being a little bit stuck with process here, and we very much would like the opportunity to continue to engage with the council officers and indeed the panel. As Elise flagged at the beginning, we've been liaising with council on this particular project for the best part of 2 years. And there's been no less than 3 rounds of feedback provided, which we've responded to in developing the design, the concept design. So we'd very much like to continue to work with council officers to close out on some of these design issues. And to that point, we will be providing some additional material in relation to the feasibility issue. Now, I think to Marco's points just now, it's more around design feasibility and giving us the intended master plan outcomes for this site and less about commercial feasibility. There's probably an acceptance from our side that, if the two parties were indeed working in a perfect world under the current controls, that a compliant development could be delivered to the current controls. However, we're in unique circumstances, and obviously that additional material that Elise will supply the council will paint a picture as to the difficulty our client is in and the site isolation issue that's certainly going to be facing both parties. In the event that 157 Walker Street was to lodge a DA in isolation tomorrow, and council are very well versed in this issue as well, they would have a very difficult time, I suspect, in demonstrating that they've resolved site isolation and isolating 153 Walker Street. So it's very much been the intent of our LEP clause, and certainly I'm the architect of that, in trying to preempt this issue and bring it to a head early on. So on that too, I know Council's position on the clause's current inconsistency with the 9.1 direction 6.3 in relation to site-specific LEP clauses, in relation to the setbacks that we're introducing. A bit of background on that, we did consider the implementation of a maximum FSR with the height control. The issue that we saw is that we hadn't developed the design enough, and we weren't confident enough around the efficiencies of the built form envelope that could result as part of a future DA. But to the points in Council's report, I think we'd be willing to concede and go back and have a look at inserting a maximum FSR, as long as we can also implement those setback provisions that we've included in the clause. The reason that the setback provisions are so important is they help us deliver those master plan outcomes that, again, is the second strongest intent behind the planning proposal. Marco has very clearly pointed out that this is not a GFA grab from us. If anything, we've designed this planning proposal to incentivise our neighbour to work with us by giving them the increased share of the floor space and height. And in doing so, we're hoping to bring them to the party. So I think we can look at inserting some setbacks as part of a DCP specific provision, but we really can't do away with setbacks altogether. Otherwise, we lose our walkway and we lose the pedestrian benefit that we feel we're getting to Little Walker Street. I think the other huge point of contention out of the council officer's report is this reverse podium to Little Walker Street. And I think Marco has touched on it. We do feel that in relation to human scale, light and air access to Little Walker Street, that our proposal actually does deliver an improved scenario. Certainly from a human scale perspective, as he's demonstrated in those diagrams that he presented. The current controls will enclose the laneway and will not improve the pedestrian experience. That is very much our view. However, should the panel and the council officers reaffirm that we're heading down the wrong track, then we can look at and playing with that tower setback and infilling the walkway. The walkway, the driver behind the walkway has always been this acknowledgement that, you know, council under the PDS want the walkway going through the site to the south at 141 Walker Street. Now that's obviously dependent on that site being redeveloped. That's the MLC tower. You know, I don't know that that site's going to be redeveloped in my lifetime, but in the event that it is, the scenario we're painting is that we can provide half of that walkway at 4 metres and they could potentially provide the other half. And that's something that we've also specifically designed in response to council feedback. So look, just in summing up, we will commit to providing some additional information around the feasibility issue. That's more centred around the design feasibility in relation to cause and working in with our other neighbours. We will provide, if we can receive a redacted version of 157's objections, we will provide a response to those issues as well. However, I just reiterate there, I don't see any adverse impact to 157 Walker Street at all. And I hope they acknowledge that this has been very specifically designed to benefit them. It certainly has been designed to not mandate that they are locked into working with us. They can still proceed in their own right. The LEP clause merely gives them additional incentive to consolidate and work with us. And other matters in relation to the wind impacts, the visual aspect from the north, I think Marco's already shared a bit of that information, but we'll package that up and express a willingness to continue working with council to get this one right.
Very well. Now, I'd just like to open it up for general questions from the panel. Thanks, John.
Josh or Mr. Owen, you talked about the consolidation, and there are obviously difficulties there, but I note in reading the council report, in fact, it's on page 19, that there really isn't any particular evidence to demonstrate that the sites can't individually be redeveloped. Do you disagree with that? I'm not sure if you've got page 19 in front of you, but
I did read that, John. And I suppose we concede that 157 Walker Street tomorrow could lodge a development application, and they could achieve a height of RL 215.
So could you, or you're not to achieve that height, but you could lodge an application to regenerate or improve your building.
Well, we're limited, keep in mind, because we're under 1,000 square metres in size, we're limited to a maximum height of 45 metres.
Which you're over now.
We're already over 45 metres. So straight away, I think the position of council was that we could knock down that building, pad it out to the available setbacks, and that could somehow be feasibly redeveloped. If we were to do that new building or that refurbished building wouldn't be anywhere near a premium A grade office rating. And we have presented some material to council from some local agents as to what are the sort of demand drivers in the North Sydney CBD. Certainly it's the premium market in Sydney, it's the jewel in the crown, and anyone that's wanting to develop a building in North Sydney is chasing that A grade premium office floor space rating, not B, not C, not D. So yeah, I would very strongly argue that I don't know, I certainly don't know any developer that would knock that building down and redevelop it feasibly.
Josh, on that note, I'm wondering, Marco, if you've got your presentation, if you still have your presentation open, perhaps it might be useful. There was a slide that you had which showed the 6 metre setbacks and had some shading to explain that. I'm wondering because that goes perfectly to Josh's point.
Yep. So there's two notes. One is with DCP controls for the tower separation. It requires 6 metre separation between the two buildings. And to be honest, that would render both sides, I would say, not feasible, because 600 square metre GBA envelope, even on RL of 215, you'll quickly run out of lifts and the floor space before that becomes not possible to be developed. So I think individually on their own, developing them as a tower forms, a 3 metre wide, 32 metre long floor plate is certainly not feasible on 153, and corresponding small floor plate on 157 is doubtful that it will result in appropriate efficiencies. But back to that point as well, in terms of the redevelopment, 153 on its own as a sort of a podium definition of that building, I think the another issue is, I certainly would find it very hard to see that a lesser yielding building in terms of floor space with a smaller height would be an appropriate redevelopment of that site or feasible development of that site. So it most likely would lock in that asset in a sort of current form, in my opinion, as architect.
Thanks, Jan.
James? Do you have some questions, James?
I've just got one thing I would like to be clarified, and maybe it's a question to Elise. Are you asking the panel today to defer consideration of this planning proposal, or are you asking us to do something else?
Yes, so deferring consideration is one option, but equally I think that if you have some inputs to provide to council in terms of ongoing engagement with us to take forward some of the concessions that we would like to make, certainly Josh and Marco have both referred to discussions that we've had with the council. I wasn't privy to those discussions, but they happened prior to lodgement of this proposal. So essentially, our client and the applicant has lodged the planning proposal, and this is the first opportunity that we've had to hear from council since that lodgement. We would like to have the opportunity to continue to develop the proposal, given that this is the first time that we've seen council's thoughts, and obviously we're disappointed with what's there, but equally we want to work with council and we want to make sure that we can address all of council's issues. So deferring it, we'd be pleased with that outcome, but equally perhaps you would wish to defer it and also provide council with your recommendations for some of the next steps with us. We would be very receptive to that, and also we would be receptive to this matter coming back before the panel, so that you can see the amount of level and detail and work that we have done, because our client is more than willing to work with council, and we're keen to show that and have the opportunity to demonstrate that.
So in that regard, Elise, what sort of a time frame are you looking at?
So of course we'd need to provide and prepare the material for council. And as I said, we've only had a few days. I would expect, and perhaps as well, I might need to speak out loud with Josh because Josh's firm would be compiling the material and then providing that to the panel. Josh, in my mind, I'm thinking that we would need at least 4 to 6 weeks to compile all of that information. Is that a fair read?
I think that's fair, and ultimately we'd benefit from an initial meeting with council to just touch base on all of the issues before we go off and do that additional work.
Yes, that would be reasonable.
Well, I'd have to say that, yes, you would clearly need to discuss it further with the council, especially given that they're not aware of this, and they need every opportunity if the panel decides that it could be deferred. It is unusual to defer a planning proposal. We have timeframes on us for DAs in particular. This planning proposal was submitted at what time? How long ago?
The planning proposal, June, I believe.
June of this year.
June of this year.
Okay, all right.
8th of July, Jan. 8th of July.
There you go.
All right, thank you very much.
Even
Right.
sooner.
Yeah, okay, rightio. Thank you very much for that. Okay. All right then. I don't have any further questions. I'm just conscious if we did defer it that we could ensure some sort of an outcome, and that some of council's officers' concerns can be addressed, and then a time frame to put it back to the panel. So we're really looking at October, November, December, coming back to a panel in December. Is that what you're envisaging?
That would sound appropriate to me. And,
I mean,
and we acknowledge that, and we have spoken with council somewhat briefly about this, in that would then defer the ultimate reporting up to council. But ultimately, on behalf of the applicant, we'd be prepared to take that additional time to address those issues.
And the reason why I say this is you'll obviously be given one shot, and
Yes.
and the other thing is also council will be in caretaker mode. So up until December, January, you're not going to get any response from the council in any event.
Yep,
So this would have had to have gone to council pretty rapidly after today's meeting. But if we do decide to defer, then we just need some form of a time frame and your commitment to work with the officers in doing so. Yep. Okay.
Jan, if I may, sorry to interrupt, it's unusual for a council officer to speak, but just in terms of timeframes, the soonest possible opportunity for getting this up, apart from October, if the panel is of a mind to defer it, would be to the first council meeting of the new term of the council, which would be in late February. So I think that kind of starts to kind of set the tone for time expectations.
I mean, I'm pleased that you came in, Marcelo, because I was going to ask you to respond in terms of what your commitments are and whether that timing was suitable. Can I hear you saying to me perhaps if we convened a panel meeting in late January, that might be a better way of dealing with this, Marcelo?
Look, in terms of priorities, Jan, we've got a hell of a lot on our plate at the moment. So if we can sort of push it out to around about January, that would be best, I think.
Okay. Now then if we do it in January, it comes back to the panel in January, then it wouldn't upset its normal progression in terms of then February to a council meeting, and you're not really losing anything. That allows council officers to liaise and you to liaise with them about many of these finer points, and then we can convene a special panel meeting to discuss this. And I would suggest that we do it with the same members, which I've selected for this panel. So I think that might be appropriate. We go, I have to discuss it with my other panel members, but I'm just trying to get an indication of timeframes, etc., and making sure that council does have the opportunity, the officers, to fit it into their program. So we would be looking then, if we did decide to defer it, coming back to us towards the end of January. Okay.
Thank you.
Nothing further. And in that regard, can I only encourage you, I understand there seems to be other impediments that are beyond my planning law expertise in terms of the adjoining property at 157. But can I encourage you to liaise with 157, and also can I encourage 157 to open up the dialogue? I don't know how you are bound legally, but I just think that would be a fruitful conversation. As you said, you don't need the approval of the consent of the owner of the adjoining property, but I just would like to have that dialogue opened up. So I say that to both parties.
Thank you, Ms. Merrill. We'll take that on board.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take it on board.
Yep. Thank you. No further questions. So we'll close this matter, and we'll make our determination later today, and it'll be on the internet probably by Friday or early next week at the latest.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, let's move to the third item on the agenda, and this is a proposal to change clause 6.3 of council's LEP and bring it in line with other planning practice procedures. We don't have anybody here to address the panel, it seems to me, and we do have Marcelo, who has given us a briefing, but just for the record, and this is a public meeting, could I invite you, Marcelo, to put on the record in a brief way? We have the report before us, but just for the record, what this proposal would in fact result in.
Thanks, Jan. So the purpose of this planning proposal is to basically bring into line any amendment to any development standard in the LEP under clause 4.6 and basically render the existing clause 6.3 subclause 3 another matter for consideration, rather than, as I've described it elsewhere, sort of an express lane exclusive of clause 4.6 and having predominance over clause 4.6 as a way of a very narrow way of achieving a variation to height limit within the CBD. So it's a subtle change, but we think it's an important change. Increasingly, landowners and applicants are using clause 6.3 subclause 3 virtually as a back way to achieving increased height limits with limited considerations for that variation.
And it does seem that this is a more equitable way of dealing with matters in the planning system on the reading of the report. My question is, which I've raised previously, the timing with the department's changes to SEP 1, or whatever we call it nowadays, clause 4.6 variations. So that's one thing I'd just like to understand a little bit further. But apart from that, has anybody else got any comments from the panel?
No, thanks, Jan.
Not from me either, Jan. Thank you.
Ken? Great. Okay then. Well, thank you all very much for attending, and thank you to the submitters for their assistance to the panel. And I will formally close the public session of this planning proposal meeting. Thank you very much. I do believe that we stay online, but I'll